Hi, and welcome back to Anxiously Capable. I'm so happy to have you here. If you're new, this is a podcast where we talk about anxiety, OCD, and intrusive thoughts, and basically where you learn to thrive, not just survive with anxiety and OCD. So I'm Jess. I'm a qualified therapist based in the UK, and I work with anxiety and OCD. And I also have my own experiences of anxiety and OCD. So what we're going to be doing on today's episode is a little bit of a Q&A. When I first launched this podcast, I reached out to my Instagram followers and I asked them basically, you can ask me anything about anxiety, OCD, recovery, intrusive thoughts, my experiences, and we got a lot of questions. So we got a lot more questions than I probably anticipated us getting. So this episode is actually going to be multiple episodes. It's probably going to span over a good few episodes. Not only did we get a lot of questions, but when I was kind of prepping some notes for these questions, I realized how much of a yapper I am. So with that in mind, I'm not wanting to make these episodes like 2 hours, 3 hours long, because when the hell are you going to listen to a 2 or 3 hour episode? Like, it's just not going to happen. Nobody wants that. If you do, let me know. But I don't think I actually could yap for 2 or 3 hours. I think I'd be really dry. I think I'd be absolutely gagging for a cup of tea by the end of it or halfway through. We'd maybe actually have to have a tea break if we did that. So, what I've done is, with that in mind, that I am a yapper and we've had a lot of questions, is I've split these episodes up. I've split the questions into themes a little bit. My idea was that if you're struggling with anxiety and you don't struggle with OCD, there's no point having anxiety and OCD questions in the same episode. So, in today's episode, we're going to be talking about OCD, intrusive thoughts, relationship OCD, and exposure and response therapy. So, a little bit more OCD related than anxiety related. And then in the future, there's going to be some episodes on anxiety as well, because I got more anxiety questions than OCD questions. So I thought we'll do the OCD episode first, we'll do the anxiety ones in the future. And if you want to submit a question for a future Q&A episode, please comment it in the comments on whatever platform you're watching this on, or you can DM me on Instagram at therapy with Jess Eden. I'm happy to answer questions. I'm probably going to do a couple of these Q&A episodes, maybe every month. If you like these episodes, let me know. Let me know, submit your own questions. And yeah, we can do a few more. So grab a cup of tea, sit back, relax, maybe, I don't know, listen to this episode if you're doing something around the house, because it could be a little bit longer than normal. But yeah, however you want to listen, you have a listen. I've got my water because I've had like 10,000 cups of tea today and I don't think I can physically do another. But yeah, grab whatever drink you want and just tune in for a little while. I thought with these Q&A episodes being a little bit more personal, it might be a nice place to start with sharing just kind of a little anxious moment from my life. I was doing this with my email list at one point, sharing something that had happened in the week or something that had triggered me, and when I felt anxious or when like I felt that need to do a compulsion, because even though I class myself as recovered, these things do still show up. The need for these things or the want to do these things does still show up. I just kind of don't go down that pathway anymore, or I try not to go down that pathway anymore. But yeah, I thought it might be quite helpful to share maybe an anxious moment from the week to just really normalize that these things are okay and anxiety has its place, and just really talk about how I dealt with that situation. So you can skip this section if you want, but if not, let me tell you about my little anxious moment from the week. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll know that I have a rescue dog called Darcy. And we rescued her in February 2024. So we've almost had her a year from when this episode comes out. And she's lovely. She's a white lab, but Darcy is also incredibly anxious. She is the OG anxious girly. She has a little jacket that says, "Anxious dog, give me space." She gets really, really scared by people, unexpected things, noises, wheelie bins, people with walking sticks. She even freaked out at somebody's recycling that was outside of our house the other day. And the main one, though, the main trigger that she has is other dogs. That's the biggest. That's the one we struggle with the most. Everything else she's kind of got semi comfortable with, but other dogs are a big problem. So there's a lot of places in town that we avoid because when Darcy gets anxious, she doesn't cower, she doesn't get scared, she comes out fighting. Her anxiety shows up as, I don't want to say aggression because she's not aggressive, but she's not going to back down. She's going to defend herself. And it's out of fear. It's not out of aggression, it's out of fear. We've been to trainers, we know it's out of fear. So there's a local dog park, and she has no interest in going up to other dogs. She has absolutely zero interest in them. But obviously, at a dog park, at a public dog park, you can't stop other dogs coming up to you. I wish you could. The amount of times I have to yell at people to recall the dogs, I really wish you could. But we can't. And it had been, I want to say, about 6 months since we went up there. And I thought, right, okay, we'll go back. We'll try it. We'll go up one morning when we know it's going to be quiet and it'll be fine. And she was having a great time. And then we came across this man and his dog. And how do I be polite about this? This man drives me up the wall because in the UK, I don't think we necessarily have any laws on like leads and leashes and stuff like that. But this man will walk his dog on the streets, on like the busy streets with a road without a lead. Which is fair. Like, I know a lot of people do that with their dogs. If their dog doesn't need a lead and the dog will walk by the side and not go up to people, amazing. Like, who would walk it with a lead if you know it's not going to run out into traffic and it's not going to disturb people? The problem is this man's dog does go up to people. It does go up to other dogs. It's like half a mile ahead of him on the road. So we've had a lot of instances with this man where his dog has been walking down the street or walking in this park and has come up to Darcy and has then got quite aggressive. I am not the kind of person that comfortably calls people out. That to me is terrifying. Turning around to someone and saying, put your dog on a lead, your dog should be on a lead, get your dog away from my dog, fills me with dread. Like, fills me with absolute dread and anxiety. So we're up at this park, then him and his dog come round in this corner. And I just feel like this absolute wave of anxiety and dread wash over me. And it's such a physical response. My heart rate's going, my palms are sweating. And without me actually even thinking, I yell at this man. Me a few years ago would not have done that. Me when I first got Darcy in February 2024 would not have done that because I wasn't used to doing that. That was still a really anxious situation. And it still is. Like, I still felt that wave of anxiety. I felt that wave of worry. I thought, oh God, that kind of sinking feeling of this dog's coming over again. But it was almost like instant click. I yelled at him. I told him to recall his dog. I told him to get his dog under control, and I got me and Darcy out of that situation. Thankfully, my partner was there as well, so that kind of balances me out. It's not just all on me to make sure that she's okay. But yeah, I thought that kind of moment was worth sharing because that's a way that anxiety still shows up, anxiety's still there, it's still present. It doesn't stop me doing the things I need to. It doesn't stop me advocating for my dog. It doesn't stop me advocating for myself because if I don't do it, what's going to happen is she's probably going to get attacked. She will get a name for herself. You know, because she comes across aggressive, even if she isn't, she's coming across like that because she's defending herself. So it's my job to do that, to step in and defend her. And I did it. And it fills me with anxiety, it fills me with dread, it fills me with fear, but I do it. And this is what I mean by this podcast when I say about creating a life where you can live alongside anxiety and OCD. We can't get rid of it. It's definitely reduced in these situations for me. 100% reduced. I can actually get those words out and say that now. There was a time where I couldn't, but we can get rid of it. We just have to learn how to let it be there and still be able to do the things that we need to do in these anxious situations. That was a little bit of a ramble. Hopefully, you've taken something from that story. Even in those anxious moments, we can do it. We can be okay. We can advocate for ourselves. We can say what we need to say, and it's okay. And even if it fills you with dread and anxiety, it's still okay. You can still do it. So, getting into the actual episode, let's have a look at some of the questions that were asked in the Q&A. So I got a couple of questions on relationship OCD, ROCD, my experiences, if I'd experienced it, and how to be comfortable with it. So just to kind of actually go over relationship OCD and what it actually shows up like is it's having unwanted or intrusive thoughts and compulsions around your relationship. So, someone with ROCD, that's relationship OCD shortened, may experience things like checking that their partner still loves them, seeking reassurance, trying to see if they can check that they actually love their partner and questioning and doubting their feelings for their partner, focusing and analysing their partner's perceived flaws. The general kind of overview of relationship anxiety is people who experience it may overly focus on their relationship, repeatedly question if their relationship is right for them, judging how strong their feelings are, questioning their partner, doubting their partner, and spending a lot of time and energy analyzing the future of their relationship. So, someone with relationship OCD might experience obsessive thoughts like, do I really love my partner? What happens if I don't? What if I don't actually want to be with them? What if they don't want to be with me? Is my partner attractive? Am I actually attracted to them? Does this one flaw of my partner, this one part of their behavior, indicate that we're not meant for each other? I'm sure you can see from that it can be really debilitating. And if you're going through that and you're experiencing them thoughts and it's having a huge toll on you, it can be awful. Really, really awful. So some compulsions and behaviors that someone might experience with relationship OCD is seeking reassurance that their partner does still love them, that they are still attracted to their partner. This can look like asking family and friends. This can look like seeking for advice online. I'm thinking like early 2000s magazines where you'd have quizzes that would be like, is my partner right for me? Someone with relationship OCD might find themselves obsessively taking these kind of quizzes, going down these sort of questions, analysing in this obsessive way that doesn't actually yield an answer and often doesn't actually bring any feeling of relief. Compulsions and behaviours can also be avoiding any commitment that actually ties you to your partner, like getting engaged, getting married, making financial commitments together, having children, avoiding any of those things that you then feel trapped doing. Overanalyzing your partner's flaws and behaviors and really focusing on their flaws. Mentally check in for any kind of feelings, physical feelings, or signs that you don't actually love your partner, that it's all a lie, that what you're feeling isn't actually real. And another one is spending a lot of time thinking about how happy you are with your partner and about the future because you feel guilty for doubting those feelings. Relationship OCD can be really, really intense, and really debilitating because a lot of it is mental compulsions. Some forms of OCD, some OCD subtypes can be quite external. People can catch on to your check in, people can catch on to your compulsions. You can kind of talk about these things a bit more. With a relationship OCD, it's very internal. It's something that you're going through by yourself. And oftentimes, because of that element of doubt and that guilt and all of those different feelings, it can be really hard to actually talk about that with someone. So, what actually helps with relationship OCD? I would love to turn around and offer you some reassurance with this. I would love to turn around and say, it's going to be okay, it's going to be fine. I'm sure you know if you're listening and you're struggling with relationship OCD, that reassurance is not actually going to help. It's going to be short term relief, and then those feelings are going to be right back. So I can't turn around and say this is going to be okay, because that's not what you actually need in this moment. What I do recommend is learning about the OCD cycle, the cycle of anxiety and OCD, especially in relation to relationship OCD. I'm going to link this down below. I'm going to attach an article about this that you might find helpful. Also, identifying your triggers and your compulsions, because that's super important, and making an effort not to avoid these. 9 times out of 10, OCD, if we're avoiding certain situations, will find another one to latch onto. Nothing's ever good enough for OCD. Nothing's ever good enough for relationship OCD. So avoidance doesn't work. So after you've identified your triggers, your compulsions, you can start practicing response prevention. And this is where it can be really important to work with a therapist. Relationship OCD can be really lonely, really isolating. And having a therapist who specializes in this kind of thing, they will help you identify those triggers, those compulsions. They'll maybe even spot ones that you don't realize you're doing, because a good OCD therapist will call you out for these things. Gently, of course, but they will call you out for these things. It's not a passive kind of therapy. They want you to be able to reduce these compulsions. That is the aim. And they will help you identify what response prevention actually looks like for you. Because it's not a matter of just stopping doing compulsions, it's finding out what that actually looks like for you. If this is something that you're struggling with, and it's really kind of taken over, I recommend reaching out to someone. I always pop a few links for finding therapists down below in the show notes or the description, so you can have a little look there. If you want to reach out to me, you can do. At the time of this episode going up, my inquiries is actually currently closed because I'm fully booked. But if you follow me on social media at Therapy with Jess Eden, then you'll be notified when my inquiries do open back up if you wanted to work with me. But I'll include the details for that down below so you can have a little read as well. In regards to whether I've experienced relationship OCD, I want to say yes, because, and the reason I'm being kind of so vague about that is because it's not been anywhere near as intense as some of the other OCD themes that I've experienced. So, yes, I've experienced it, but not in a debilitating way. And I know I've experienced it because I've had those moments of checking that my partner still loves me, checking that he's still happy, checking that we're okay, feeling like I have to always kind of do the best in the relationship, otherwise it's all going to go. So those kind of more compulsive things, yes, but not in a way that significantly impacted my life. And it's worth recognizing that we can all experience relationship anxiety. We can all experience worry in relationship. It's quite a daunting thing to be in a relationship with someone at times. You're putting a lot of trust in that person. So experiencing anxiety in a relationship is completely normal. But what can happen is, if this anxiety, or if it's becoming relationship OCD, or if it is for relationship OCD, it can take a huge toll on you, on your relationship, and on how you feel. And the next question that I got was, do you find exposure and response therapy actually helpful and works? So if you're new to exposure and response therapy, let me tell you a little bit about it. So it's the kind of gold standard for OCD, the gold standard therapy for OCD, and it can also be incredibly helpful for anxiety, especially in kind of situations like social anxiety, phobias, those kind of situations where you're actively avoiding doing something. But essentially, exposure and response therapy, also known as ERP, is a form of therapy that gently exposes you and builds you up to being in these feared situations, so that you can reduce your compulsions, you can change your responses to these situations, you can reduce those feelings of anxiety, but it's all about it being a very gradual process. So, with anxiety and with OCD, it's really easy to become stuck in a cycle of self awareness. So, you've got all this knowledge, you're learning all this stuff about anxiety, about yourself, about your OCD, you're learning everything you could want to know. Your self awareness is becoming huge, but you're left feeling more frustrated because you've got all this knowledge of what you should be doing, but you can't do it. That anxiety is still stepping in, that fear is still stepping in, and you're actually still avoiding those situations. You're still doing the compulsions. You're still not able to do anything different, even with all this knowledge. What ERP does is it lets you leave behind some of these anxious behaviors, these compulsions, these habits that have built up because of your anxiety by building your confidence and building your feeling of, I can do this. So, that knowledge is so important, that self awareness is so important. But can you see how, if you're just left at that point where you've only got that self awareness and nothing's actually being put into practice, there's no helpful things to actually help you in those situations when the anxiety is actually there, how that can be quite debilitating. So, ERP is it is this self-awareness, it's building that knowledge, but it's also actually doing something in those situations, actually practicing that response prevention where you do something different that ultimately reduces those anxious behaviors. I feel like it's worth talking about a couple of myths of ERP as well, because there are a lot of myths around it. And it's one of the things that stops people then going down that route. Biggest myth, sink or swim. The idea of you're just going to have to throw yourself into these compulsions, throw yourself into these anxious behaviors, throw yourself into resisting these things and hope for the best. That is not ERP. That is not how it works. It isn't a matter of you go and see a therapist and they tell you something and you have to do it and it's like the worst thing in the world. Absolutely not. It's more collaborative. And how I work is I find the situations that push you a little bit out of that comfort zone, a little bit into that anxiety, a little bit into those situations that would maybe trigger your OCD, pushes you just slightly into that, but not too much that you're overwhelmed. And we also find the things that make those situations easier, things that in that moment we can use to make those situations just that little bit easier so that you can actually build that confidence and get that I can do this feeling. For example, social situations, maybe your anxiety is telling you that you can't go there because there's a big crowd and you can't be part of that. What we would do, ERP wise, is we would find the situations that feel a bit more manageable so that you don't have to avoid those social situations and you can build up to those really fear inducing, anxiety inducing situations. So you slowly increase the anxiety over time as your confidence grows, and eventually you kind of become able to tolerate those feelings of anxiety and you feel more confident in those situations. ERP is never about forcing you into uncomfortable situations, it's about building up that discomfort so that you can build up your confidence and naturally decrease that anxiety, decrease the need for those compulsions over time. When I'm doing this with clients, we're always working backwards to find a safe place to start with ERP. And it's so important to find that place because if you start anywhere else, this is going to be too overwhelming. You need to start in an area that feels okay, that feels comfortable. And the beginning part of ERP work with me is finding that place. So, yeah, I do find that ERP actually works. I've had a lot of clients get a lot of benefit out of ERP, exposure and response therapy. And I know I myself have. It's creating that physical feeling of safety in the body. So, we can tell ourselves that we're safe. We can tell ourselves that we're okay, we can handle these situations, but actually physically getting to experience those situations and come out feeling okay, confidence building, that sense of I've done this is so important, so important. And general talk therapy tends to miss that element of it. So combining the two, having a bit of that ERP, a little bit of that understanding what's going on as well, talking through things is really the main way that I work. But the next question we have was about intrusive thoughts and how to not interact with them. So, intrusive thoughts are those unexpected images, thoughts that can be quite scary, quite daunting. They kind of catch us off guard. They can make us feel quite guilty. They're often quite distressing thoughts. But the thing to note is that these do happen to everyone, literally everyone. But if you struggle with anxiety and OCD, what happens is these thoughts have the ability to stick more, and we call them sticky thoughts. So even though they are normal and a lot of people can kind of just dismiss them as sort of like background chatter in their mind, if you struggle with anxiety and OCD, these thoughts do stick more. They tend to kind of latch on, and they create a lot of like emotional responses. So we can feel scared of these thoughts, we can feel intimidated by them, we can feel guilty around having them, we can be left questioning if we're a good or bad person because of them. And the more we engage with these intrusive thoughts, the more we think about them, ruminate on them, whatever that engagement looks like for you, the bigger these thoughts become, the more power they then hold, the more frequent they become, the scarier they become. Basically, if you're engaging with these thoughts, they're going to stick more and they're going to be even harder to overcome. So, when we talk about engaging with intrusive thoughts, what do I actually mean by that? And basically, this is anything that kind of encourages the thought to stay around, to stick around, to not just be part of that background chatter that we can just dismiss. So this can look like analyzing the thought, ruminating on the thought, overthinking about the thought, trying to understand what that thought means, what it means about you as a person, if it means anything, really just kind of digging into the why that we're having these thoughts. It can look like being scared of the thought, feeling guilt around the thought, intentionally avoiding anything that triggers these thoughts is also still engaging with it because you're actively choosing not to put yourself in these situations because you're already anticipating that that thought is going to come. This is really complex and probably needs its own episode in itself. And intrusive thoughts are so nuanced because what becomes a sticky thought for you would maybe be background chatter for me, and what becomes a sticky thought for me would be background chatter for you. So there's a lot of nuances with this as well. But the first steps to kind of not interacting with these thoughts, disengaging from these thoughts, and being able to just let them exist without them having a lot of power over you is noticing the difference between an intrusive thought and rumination and that overanalyzing. So being able to separate the moments where you're having the intrusive thought and when you're engaging with the intrusive thought. It's crucial to be able to separate those two things because we have no control over the intrusive thought. That's natural, that's normal, it happens. Everybody experiences that. Everybody experiences these thoughts that just kind of pop up out of nowhere. That is normal. Thoughts are just thoughts. But what we do have more control over is everything that follows that, the thoughts that we then create from that thought, that we have some power over, we have some control over, we can do something about that part of it. So we can't stop or control our intrusive thoughts, but we have more power than we realize over the thoughts that follow that. And also, it's about accepting the presence of that intrusive thought, not accepting the thought as true. Nothing like that. When I say that, a lot of people kind of freak out and think that they have to accept that that thought is true and that it means something about them. Not at all. Not at all. We're just accepting that that thought is there, that it exists, that it's showing up, that it is there in your mind, but it doesn't have to mean anything about you. Learning to accept the presence of these intrusive thoughts and disengaging from the intrusive thoughts and all the thoughts that follow after does take a little bit of practice. If it is something that you're trying to do, that you're trying to work on and you're struggling with, I've actually created something that might help you with this. So I created a mini guide called Break Free from Rumination, which is a 10-page guide that talks you through and teaches you how to separate those intrusive thoughts from the rumination, how you can disengage and how you can accept those thoughts. So crafting those phrases, those disengagement phrases that are unique to you. So this guide is basically designed to help you break free from these unhelpful thought patterns that happen when we get these sticky intrusive thoughts. It's designed to help you feel empowered separating these, find peace of mind, and it's just a really simple, sustainable strategy that you can kind of put into practice. It's not a quick fix. None of what I do is a quick fix. I don't believe in it. I believe it's just kind of then a little plaster over what's happening when really it's the longer term things that we need to be working with. So this is a longer term strategy. This is something that you do have to put into practice. You're not just going to read this guide and be like, yeah, I'm absolutely fine. Like, I don't want you to come away thinking that's going to happen. No, it's actually about putting the things then into practice. So if you want to start building a calmer mind, it is literally less than the price of your monthly Netflix subscription for one payment. So I will link that below in the description or the show notes for you. You can check that out. Wow. Okay. That was a long episode. Oh my gosh. I hope you enjoyed it. I would love to hear what you thought of this style of episode because it is a little bit different to my other ones. It's a bit more chatty. But yeah, I would love to hear from you. If you have any questions that you want answering in future Q&A episodes, feel free to drop them in the comments or you can message me on Instagram at Therapy with Jess Eden. I would love to hear from you. But thank you ever so much for tuning in. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, follow, rate, review, whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on. Please do all the things that help it then reach more people. Because if you found this episode helpful, then somebody else might. And if you do all of those good things that just kind of help it get out there, then you're helping somebody else who might need to hear this as well. So thank you for listening, and I can't wait to see you next week. Hope you have a great week. Take care. Bye.